Welcome back to Beyond the Feature. I'm Dr. Patrick Jones, Microsoft Innovative Educator Expert, Director of Cloud Strategies over at AuditSolve, and someone who has spent a career watching organizations make decisions based on information that they were completely confident in it, and it turned out to be wrong. So, as always, you can find everything related to this show at beyondthefeature.com. And if you want to know more about the books, courses, and whatever else I'm working on, that's over at drpjj21.com. So today's episode is about spreadsheets. And I know what some of you are thinking. Spreadsheets. Really? That's the topic? That feels a little basic for a podcast about workflows and productivity. But stick with me, because this one is anything but basic. So here's the thing about spreadsheets. They are still, in 2026, the most widely used business tool on the planet. Excel alone has 1.5 billion users worldwide. Yeah, 1.5 billion. More than any other productivity application ever built. Nonprofits run their budgets in them. Small businesses track their clients in them. Healthcare organizations manage schedules with it. Schools report data in every element of it. Finance teams live in them. So across every vertical you can think of, the spreadsheet is still the workhorse. And yet, and this is the part that keeps me up at night, most of those spreadsheets are a mess. And I'm guilty of that too. So not because people don't care, not because they're not smart, but because nobody ever taught them what clean data actually looks like, why it matters, and what happens when it isn't. And here's where 2026 adds a completely new layer to this conversation. Because now we have AI. We have Copilot in Excel. We have Power BI pulling from those same spreadsheets. We have teams uploading files to ChatGPT, to Claude, to any number of tools, and asking those tools to analyze, summarize, and make recommendations based on the data inside. And every single one of those tools, every one, is only as good as the data it's working with. Garbage in, garbage out. That phrase has been around for decades, and it has never been more true or more consequential than it is right now. So today, we're going to talk about what clean data actually means in a spreadsheet context, what the most common problems are and why they happen, what bad data actually costs organizations, and what you can do practically this week to start building the kind of data discipline that makes every tool you use work better. All right, let's go. So, first of all, before we get into the how-to, I want to spend a few minutes on why it matters. Because I find that when people understand the real scale of the problem, it stops feeling like housekeeping conversation and starts feeling like a business strategy conversation. So according to Gartner, poor data quality costs organizations an average of $15 million a year per year. And IBM research puts the total of cost of bad data to the U.S. economy alone at $3.1 trillion annually. Not billion, trillion. That is a number that stops making intuitive sense when you say it out loud. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's enterprise data. That's big companies with massive databases and complex systems. That doesn't apply to my 50-person nonprofit or my regional small business. Here's why it does. The scale is different, but the mechanisms are identical. A 2025 IBM Institute for Business Value study found that 43% of chief operations officers now identify data quality as their most significant data priority. And more than a quarter of organizations across all sizes estimate they lose more than $5 million a year due to poor data quality. McKinsey research found that bad data leads to a 20% decrease in productivity and a 30% increase in costs. And think about what that means at a smaller scale. If your organization has a team of 10 people and each of them is spending even 2 hours a week rechecking, re-entering, or second-guessing data in spreadsheets, which is conservative, by the way, you've just been burned 100 hours of capacity every single week on a problem that is entirely preventable. Now, there's a principle in data management. It's called the 110-100 rule. The idea is simple. It costs 1 unit of effort to fix a data problem at the point of entry when you catch it as it's being typed in. It costs 10 units to fix it later after it has moved through your process. And it costs 100 units to fix it downstream after it's influenced decisions, been included in reports, or fed into a system that is built on top of it. 100 times the cost of catching it at the source. That rule applies whether you're a Fortune 500 company or a 10-person team running your client list in Excel. The scale changes, the math doesn't. And right now, with AI in the picture, the downstream cost of bad data has gotten dramatically higher because AI doesn't just use your data, it scales it, it amplifies it, it builds confident-sounding conclusions on top of it, and presents those conclusions to decision makers as analysis. A messy spreadsheet used to just be a headache for the person working in it. Now it's potentially the foundation of an AI-generated recommendation that shapes your organization's strategy. That's not a small problem. That is a critical one. All right, before we can fix anything, we need a shared definition. Because I think one of the reasons data quality doesn't get the attention it deserves is that clean data feels vague. People nod along, but don't have a concrete picture of what it means in practice. So let me give you one. Clean data in a spreadsheet has 5 qualities. These apply whether you're managing donor records for a nonprofit, tracking inventory for a retail operation, monitoring student attendance at school, or running financials for a small business. All right, here's quality 1. Consistency. Every piece of the same type of information looks the same. If you're recording state names, they're all spelled out or they're all abbreviated, not a mix of both. If you're entering dates, every date follows the same format. If you're listing a status, active, inactive, pending, those exact words are used every time. Not active one place, and then active lowercase another, and then active all caps somewhere else, and act in a third column. Computers and AI tools are case sensitive, delimiter sensitive, and format sensitive. Inconsistency looks like variety to a human, and it looks like different data to a machine. All right, quality 2 is completeness. Every field that should have a value has one. There are no blank cells where information is required. If you don't have the information, you record that intentionally. A standard placeholder, a note, a defined value for unknown, rather than just leaving it empty. Because a blank cell is ambiguous. It might mean the information doesn't exist. It might mean it wasn't collected. It might mean it was accidentally deleted. The machine doesn't know which, and neither does the person who opens the file. All right, quality 3, accuracy. The data actually reflects reality. This sounds obvious, but it's the hardest quality to maintain over time because data decays. Research shows that business-to-business contact data decays at a rate of about 20% a year, meaning that even if your spreadsheet was perfectly accurate 12 months ago, roughly 1 in 5 records may now be outdated. People move, organizations change, numbers shift, prices change. Accuracy requires ongoing maintenance, not just a one-time data entry effort. All right, quality 4, structure. Each column contains one type of information and one type only. The first row contains clear, descriptive headers. There are no merged cells in the data area. There is no color coding that carries meaning because color is invisible to AI and invisible to most analytical tools. If the color of a row means something important, that meaning needs to live in a column with a value. No notes crammed into cells that were built for numbers. No totals mixed in with individual records. The structure of the spreadsheet tells the tools that read it what kind of data they're looking at, and a clean structure makes that communication unambiguous. Quality 5, no duplicates. Every record that should be unique actually is. Duplicate rows in a data set will silently double count things in any analysis. If your sales data has the same transaction in the file twice, maybe because someone copy-pasted and forgot, your total revenue figure is overstated. Your AI summary will include inflated numbers, and your Power BI dashboard will show a chart that looks right but isn't. Duplicates are invisible to the eye when you're scrolling through a large data set. They are absolutely not invisible to the math. All right, 5 qualities: consistency, completeness, accuracy, structure, and no duplicates. That's the standard. Not complicated in concept, but generally hard to maintain in practice, especially across a team. But it's worth every bit of that effort. Now, let's get specific a little bit here, because knowing the standard is one thing. Understanding the most common ways people fall short of it and why it happens is what actually changes behavior. So let's walk through the mistakes I see most consistently across organizations of every size. So the first problem is inconsistent formatting, especially in text fields. This is the most common and most underestimated. Someone types New York with a capital N and a capital Y in one row. Someone types in New York, all lowercase, in the next. NY in the one after that, and N period Y period somewhere further down. To a human reading the list, all of those mean the same thing. To Excel's filter, to Power BI's grouping logic, to any AI tool analyzing the column, those are 4 completely different values. Your New York records will never aggregate correctly. Your regional analysis will be fragmented and wrong, and nobody will realize why. The same thing happens with names. Dr. Patrick Jones with a capital DR period, capital P, capital J in one cell. Patrick Jones in another with a capital P, capital J. Jones, comma, Patrick in a third. 3 records, 3 different apparent people, 1 actual person. Deduplication becomes nearly impossible. Mail merges go sideways. AI-generated summaries reference the same person multiple times without knowing they're the same person. All right, problem 2. Dates stored as text instead of a date value. So this one is subtle but devastating for analysis. If you type a date as text, January 15, 2024, it looks like a date, but Excel cannot do date math on it. It cannot sort chronologically. It cannot calculate how many days have passed. Power BI cannot trend it over time. Copilot cannot group your records by month. And the telltale sign is that the cell is left aligned instead of right aligned in Excel. Dates and numbers right aligned by default. Text left aligns. So if your dates are hugging the left side of a column, they are text, not dates. And if your timeline analysis will then show up broken. All right, problem 3, multiple pieces of information crammed into one cell. So John Smith Chicago active is all in one cell. Or March 15, 2024 $1,200 paid all together. It reads fine to a human, and it's completely unworkable for any analytical tool. You cannot filter by city if city is embedded in a free text string with a name and a status. You cannot sum the revenue column if the dollar amount is sharing a cell with a date and a status flag. One piece of information per cell. It's not a suggestion. It's the foundational rule of structured data. Now, problem 4, totals and averages living in the data body, not at the bottom. So someone adds a subtotal row in the middle of the data set, maybe after each department section or each quarter. It looks tidy and organized to the person who built it. But to any tool reading the data as a table, That subtitle row is just another record. The totals get included in the averages. They get counted as data points. The grand total ends up double counted because the subtotals were already included in the individual records that were summed. Power BI pulls them in as data. Copilot includes them in its summary. The analysis is corrupted quietly and completely. All right, problem 5. Merged cells. Merged cells are the bane of every data analyst's existence. They look beautiful in a printed report. They're structurally catastrophic in a working data table. When you merge those cells, you hide data, break sorting, break filtering, confuse pivot tables, and make it nearly impossible for any AI or analytical tool to understand the structure of what it's looking for. I've seen Power BI reports that were completely wrong because the source Excel file used merged header cells. The tool couldn't determine which columns belong to which headers. Merged cells belong in formatted reports. They have no place in a working data table. And problem 6, color as information. Red rows are the overdue ones. Yellow means pending review. Green means approved. This is one of the most natural ways humans organize visual information and one of the most dangerous habits in a spreadsheet that will be used for analysis. Color is completely invisible to Excel formulas. Power BI, Copilot, ChatGPT, Claude, and every other analytical tool. If the status of a record lives only in its cell color, that status does not exist in the data, period. Every overdue, pending, and approved value needs to live in a column with a typed value. The color can be decorative on top of that, but it cannot be the data. Now, these 6 problems are not exotic edge cases. I see them all the time. They're in almost every working spreadsheet in almost every organization, and they do not happen because people are careless. They happen because nobody explained why they matter. Until the analysis comes back wrong, or the AI gives a bizarre answer, or the Power BI chart doesn't match the manual count, nobody realizes the structure of the spreadsheet was the problem all along. And that's when the 110-100 rule comes into play. All right, let's talk about what all of this means in the context of the AI tools that are now part of most people's workflows. Whether you're using Copilot in Excel, dragging a file into Power BI, or uploading a spreadsheet to ChatGPT to ask questions about it, or sharing data with Claude for analysis, all of these tools operate on the same fundamental principle. They read your data, interpret its structure, and generate insights based on what they find. They're not verifying your data. They are not flagging inconsistencies for you before you start. They take what you give them, assume it is what it appears to be, and build their analysis on top of it. That's the critical thing to understand. AI does not clean your data before it analyzes it. It analyzes it as is. So let me walk you through what actually happens when you hand a messy spreadsheet to an AI tool. You upload a donor list to organize giving trends. The state column has New York with a capital N, capital Y, NY, capital, New York, all lowercase, and N, capital N, period, Y, capital Y, period. All mixed together. The AI groups them as 4 separate regions. Your New York analysis is now split 4 ways, each one showing a fraction of the actual giving from that state. The trend line for New York looks flat or confusing. The recommendations that the AI generates about your New York outreach are built on fragmented data, and the output looks confident and well formatted, tables, percentages, charts, even though the underlying logic is broken. Or you ask Copilot in Excel to summarize your sales data for the quarter, but there are subtotal rows scattered throughout the data. Copilot includes those subtitles in its sum. Your quarterly total is overstated significantly because the revenue was counted once in the individual records and then again in the subtotals, right? We talked about that already. The number Copilot gives you looks authoritative because that's what Copilot does, but it's wrong. Or you open Power BI and connect it to an Excel file where the dates are stored as text. You ask for a trend line by month. Power BI can't parse the dates because they're text strings, not date values. The visualization either errors out or groups everything into a single undifferentiated bucket with no chronological order. The trend analysis has no trend. And that one I know personally. I've done it before. So in every one of those scenarios, AI is doing its job correctly. It's reading and analyzing the data it was given. The failure is in the data, not the tool. And the output, presented in clean charts and confident language, makes the failure invisible to anyone who doesn't already know what they're looking for. So this is why clean data is not a nice to have anymore. It's a prerequisite for AI to be useful. So Gartner predicts that later in 2026, organizations using AI-driven tools on well-governed clean data will reduce their operational costs by up to 30% compared to organizations running AI on unmanaged data. The benefit of AI is real, but it's conditional. It is conditioned entirely on the quality of what goes in. Now, there's good news on that front. AI tools, when given clean, well-structured data, are generally remarkable. Copilot in Excel can identify trends, flag anomalies, generate pivot tables, write complex formulas, and produce a narrative summary of numerical data, all from a simple prompt. Power BI can build interactive dashboards that would have taken days of manual work a few years ago. And tools like ChatGPT and Claude can analyze a clean data set, answer specific questions generatively about it, and surface those insights that might have taken hours to find manually. So the capability is there. The question is whether your data is ready to unlock it. And for most organizations, the honest answer right now is not yet. It can be. So let's take a practical look at how this can work. Here is how you actually build a clean data discipline in your organization. That's why we're here, right? Not as a one-time project, but as a durable workflow. So the first step is to design it before you collect. The most powerful moment to prevent bad data is before anyone enters a single row. Before you share a spreadsheet with your team, decide what the columns are, what format each one expects, and what the valid values are for any field that should be controlled. Use Excel's built-in data validation to restrict what can be entered in a cell. Drop-down lists for status fields, date formats for date columns, number ranges for numeric inputs. When Excel tells someone they've entered an invalid value before they move on to the next cell, you catch the problem at the 1 unit cost level, not the 100 unit level down the road. So give your columns clear descriptive headers in the first row, not column A and column B, not merged header blocks. Specific single row headers like first name, last name, city, state, date of first gift, amount. Each column is one thing. Every row is one record. That structure is what every analytical tool in the world is built to expect. Now, step 2, establish naming conventions and stick to them. Pick a format for every repeated text value and document it. States are 2-letter abbreviations, always uppercase. Statuses are active, inactive, or pending. Capitalized, never abbreviated, never in all caps. Department names match exactly what's in your HR system. Whatever you decide, write it down and share it with everyone who enters data. Consistency is a team sport. One person using a different convention can corrupt a column that everyone else maintained perfectly. All right, step 3, do a regular data audit, not a one-time cleanup. So set a recurring reminder, monthly, quarterly, whatever makes sense for the pace of your work, to review the health of your key spreadsheets. In Excel, the remove duplicates function is built right into the data tab. Right, it's right there. Flash fill can standardize inconsistent text entries. The filter function lets you scan a column for unexpected values. Power Query, which is also built into Excel, is one of the most powerful tools most people have never touched. It lets you transform, standardize, and clean data in repeatable, documented steps that run automatically every time the file is refreshed. Now, those are a lot of features, and we're not going to get into the features so much because we've got books and videos that talk about features. This is about the workflows. You don't need to be a data analyst to use these tools. You need to understand what clean data looks like and have the intention to maintain it. The tools are already there. All right, step 4, move information out of formatting and into columns. This week, take one spreadsheet that uses color to mean something and add a column for that meaning. Status, priority, review flag, whatever the color was communicating. Give it a proper home in a typed field. You can keep the color for visual reference, but the data that drives that color analysis, the AI interpretation and reporting, needs to live in a cell with a value. This single change can unlock analysis that was previously impossible on data you already have. All right, step 5, separate your data table from your reports. That's a big one. This is a workflow principle that makes everything else easier. Your raw data table, the structured list of records, lives on one sheet, untouched by totals, formatting, merge cells, or presentation design. Your reports, summaries, and formatted outputs live on separate sheets or in separate files, pulling from the data table through formulas, pivot tables, or Power BI connections. When your data table is clean and separate, every tool that reads from it gets clean input. And when the data changes, the reports update automatically because they're connected to the source, not copied from it. All right, step 6. Before you hand data to any AI tool, do a 30-second check. Before you upload that spreadsheet to Copilot, ChatGPT, Claude, any other analytical tool, scan it quickly. Are the headers clear and in a single row? Are the dates actual date values, not text? Are there any subtotal rows embedded in the data? Are there merge cells? Are there blank rows in the middle of the data set? These take 30 seconds to check and potentially save you from an AI output that looks authoritative but is fundamentally wrong. Think of it the same way you would proofread an email before you send it. Quick check before handing data to an AI, that's just good practice. All right, I want to take a moment here to zoom out a little bit again, because I think there's a bigger conversation worth naming. Data literacy, the ability to understand, create, and work with data in a disciplined way, is one of the most underdeveloped skills in a small and mid-sized organization right now. It's not because people aren't smart or capable. It's because it was never treated as a necessary skill. Spreadsheets were assumed to be intuitive. Data entry was assumed to be straightforward. Analysis was assumed to belong only to people with specialized training. All three of those assumptions are increasingly wrong. As AI becomes part of everyone's workflow, data literacy is becoming a baseline competency for the way email literacy was 20 years ago. If your team doesn't understand what clean data looks like, the AI tools you're investing in will underdeliver. Not because the tools are bad, but because the foundation they're working from is unstable. This is something I write about a lot and teach across several of the courses and books. Getting up to speed on how to work with Microsoft 365 tools, right? Including Excel, in ways that actually support the analysis, reporting, and AI readiness. That's a practical need that a lot of organizations have right now and aren't sure how to address. So if that's your situation, we got Olympus Academy Press with a bunch of .com with a bunch of good books. You can start there. If you want online courses, I have Olympus Academy too, right? Those are online courses that teach many of those same principles and features. But because the organizations that build this foundation now are going to have a meaningful advantage over the ones that keep feeding those AI tools the same messy spreadsheets and wondering why the output doesn't match the promise. All right, your spreadsheet is one of the most powerful tools your organization has. It is also one of the most quietly unreliable ones. If the data inside it has never been held to a consistent standard. Clean data is not a luxury for organizations with dedicated data teams. It's a workflow discipline that any team can build with tools they already have, starting this week. The 5 qualities, consistency, completeness, accuracy, structure, and no duplicates, are not complicated. They just require intentionality. And that intentionality pays off every time your team pulls a report, every time you open a dashboard, and every time you hand a file to an AI and ask it a question. So here's your action for this week. Pick one spreadsheet, one that matters, one your team uses regularly, one that feeds into decisions or gets shared upwards. Open it and scan it against the 5 qualities. Just look. Take a look at what you find. You don't have to fix everything today, but you need to know what you're working with before you can get where you want to go. Now, for cloud strategy conversations like this, tool assessments, organizational readiness work, that's what I do every day at AuditSolve. Reach out. I'm here to help, right? Everything about this is at beyondthefeature.com, the podcast, the app, all the links. And for more about me and everything I'm working on, go to drpjj21.com. Share this podcast with one person on your team who owns the spreadsheets, or you think who's been asking why AI analysis doesn't match what they expected. If you think somebody needs it, share it, right? This episode is the answer to that question. So, and definitely make sure you subscribe to us, share us around, follow us. We love getting information in your comments. So I'm Dr. Patrick Jones. Thanks for being here on Beyond the Feature, and I'll see you next time.